Unless you're some sort of weird idiot or WWE do a piss poor job of hyping you up for it, the actual Royal Rumble matches should be the things that you most look forward to at its namesake event. I would wager that most watch for the twists, turns, surprises, and the general thrill of counting down from number 10, but we shouldn't forget about the men and women who make up the undercards in non-Rumble matches. The Rumble may be the draw, but it's not always the best actual match on the card, and has regularly been upstaged, usually when a major title has been on the line elsewhere. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 best Royal Rumble matches that weren't the Rumble. Join us. Number 10, Triple H vs Shawn Michaels in 2004. There was a tinge of controversy surrounding Triple H's last man standing World Heavyweight title defense against Shawn Michaels at the 2004 Rumble. Allotted a rather considerate 23 minutes plus entrances, the Game and the Heartbreak Kid were given more time than the rest of the undercard, 4 other matches combined. Credit to the DX lads, however, because they took that time and used it to craft a compelling, bloody bout that was another winning entry to their long-running series. The pair were well acquainted by this point and had collided in all manner of different stipulation bouts, but the last man standing rules here certainly added to the drama. They brawled, bled, and bounced all over the place, with Michaels crashing through the announce table in a spectacular bump. The fans got more and more into it as it went on and were on their feet when HBK finally hit what looked to be a title-winning sweet chin music, only for Shawn, beaten and sporting a crimson mask, to fall to the canvas in a heap before getting fully to his feet, the match ending in a somewhat unsatisfactory draw. Everything up to the finish was great mind. Number 9, Chris Jericho vs Chris Benoit in 2001. Chris's Jericho and Benoit had followed each other throughout their careers, with Y2J emulating his fellow Canadian by showing up in Japan, ECW, and WCW not too long after the Rabid Wolverine had made his mark in each territory. They'd had their fair share of battles and had produced a cracking feud in WWE in 2000, with Benoit walking through the door of Titan Towers after Jericho on this occasion. Great as that series was, none of the matches quite compared to their Intercontinental title ladder war from the 2001 Rumble. Built around violence, grit, and psychology, and less of a stunt show than some prior ladder matches, theirs was a gripping contest that featured some never-before-seen moves and sequences, like the top of the ladder walls of Jericho and Benoit trying to tope his way through a steel chair. They beat the maple syrup out of each other during the 19-minute show stealer, keeping the audience guessing as to which way it was going to go, with some tantalizing near misses before Jericho grabbed the strap to become the new champion. Number 8, Shawn Michaels vs The Undertaker. One of the highlights of late 1997 WWE, the rivalry between Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker had produced many stirring matches, including the epic first ever Hell in a Cell match. Looking to draw a line under their dispute, they met at the 98 Rumble in a casket match main event with the showstoppers WWE title on the line. Another predictably brilliant outing, with the Stips adding a new dynamic. Both men were on form, with Shawn especially putting in a customarily bump-happy shift. It was during one of those first spectacular bumps, a backdrop over the top rope onto the casket, that Michaels suffered the back injury that would see him retire for over 4 years, though the adrenaline was flowing and he didn't know it at the time. Finding their groove, they ramped up the big spots, including a rarely seen piledriver on the steel stairs. In the end, the Phenom looked to have things sewn up, but his plans were scuppered via a massive run-in, and then Kane finished the job and trapped him inside the casket before setting it on fire. Brothers, eh? What are they like? Number 7, John Cena vs Umaga in 2007. After reaching the summit and winning the WWE title at WrestleMania 21, John Cena began receiving a swift and intense backlash from WWE fans who resented him for supposedly being the hand-picked chosen one. While his see-through street-fighting rapper gimmick was at times a bit naff, Cena was the man for the big occasion and routinely came through in top matches when the pressure was on. At the 2007 Royal Rumble, he not only put forward a tremendous performance in his WWE title last man standing match with Umaga, but he also added some much-needed credibility to his never-say-die character. This also served as one hell of a coming-out party for the Samoan Bulldozer, who had been on a tear for the previous 8 or so months, but had yet to have a truly great match. Taking full advantage of their surroundings, Umaga and Cena had something akin to a more violent, weapons-filled version of the classic Hulk Hogan vs. the Monster of the Week match.
Crash! Bang! Wallop! What a wrestling match.
And what a creative finish too, Cena getting the win after making his opponent pass out by applying an STFU with an assist from the top rope, which had come loose during the carnage. Number 6, Chris Jericho versus The Rock in 2002. Fresh off beating The Rock and Steve Austin in one night to become the first ever undisputed champion, Chris Jericho set about beating them on back-to-back pay-per-views. He started with the great one at the Royal Rumble. Rock and Jericho had not long since had a thriller at No Mercy 2001 over the WCW World title, with Y2J emerging on that night with the big gold belt around his waist. The dynamic was different at the Rumble, with Jericho a now fully fledged heel as opposed to a sorta kinda tweener, though the match was no less thrilling because of it. Arguably even better than their No Mercy offering, the two men electrified for 19 pulsating minutes full of good wrestling, big moves, callbacks, close near falls, and shenanigans like ref bumps and run-ins. Everything you could want in a major title match from one of the biggest pay-per-views, it finished with some commendable cheating from the champ to retain. He not only smacked Rock and his Brahma bollocks, but also rammed Dwayne's head into the exposed turnbuckle before pinning him with his feet on the ropes. What a heel. Number 5, Brock Lesnar versus Seth Rollins versus John Cena in 2015. You look at the lineup, the stakes, and the setting, and you think to yourself, how can this be anything other than absolutely class? Then you remember that it all hinges on which version of Brock Lesnar decides to clock in on the night, and well, it suddenly appears as though there's an equal chance it could be a clanger or a banger. Thankfully, the Beast Incarnate had his working boots on and looked downright unstoppable as he punched through and suplexed his opponents around at will. Cena and Seth intermittently recovered and managed to get Lesnar to stop chucking them about, but Lesnar came back time and time again, like a reliable case of herpes. By the way, Brock mate, if you're watching, I'm not saying that you're anything like a nasty venereal disease, alright? Or in fact, I've ever had herpes, for that matter, despite what high school blabbermouth Susie Simpson might tell you. Anyway, back to the match, which was a contemporary classic, and the best thing on this show by a Minneapolis, Minnesota mile. Speaking of, Brock retained, coming back for revenge after being put through the announce table and stretchered out. Why on earth would you make him even more angry? Number 4, Mankind versus The Rock in 1999. Going into their WWE title I Quit match at the 1999 Rumble, Mick Foley knew that he had to do everything within his power to not only have a show-stealing match, but also get The Rock ready for his WrestleMania date with Steve Austin. Nobody knew just what incredible and downright scary lengths Foley would go to in order to accomplish this, but accomplish it, he did. While the bout is remembered for the sickening finale, which saw the People's Champion go for a spot of batting practice on Mankind's head with a steel chair, the bulk of the match is really very good indeed and well worth going out of your way to see. A classic example of the arena-wide Attitude Era brawl, it wasn't just about the bumps and weapon spots, but also about both men getting their characters over too, which made the action even more engrossing. The decagon of unprotected chair shots is uncomfortable viewing, especially with what we know about concussions and CTE now, but take nothing away from either man here. They brought it. Number 3, Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit in 2003. The 2003 Royal Rumble event was a tale of two world title bouts. The first was a Raw heavyweight title match between champion Triple H and Scott Steiner, both of whom were knackered going into it. Famously awful on almost every level, fans completely turned on the bout at about the 15th botch, and sadly, it pretty much killed off the genetic freak as a credible force from the get-go. The second, though, was a SmackDown WWE title match between champion Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit. Everything that the first match wasn't, this was an example of two exemplary professional wrestlers in the prime of their careers going out and doing what they do best for 18 first-rate minutes. Two of the best technicians ever forewent sports entertainment distractions and did what it says on the marquee. They wrestled. And bloody well too. The frequent foes were used to having barn burners with one another, but this match picked things up a notch with its crispness, intensity, and crowd response. The Olympic hero won clean with an ankle lock, but the rabid Wolverine didn't walk or limp away looking like a loser. Number 2, AJ Styles versus John Cena in 2017. 1 year after his sensational surprise debut in the 2016 Royal Rumble match, AJ Styles walked into the 2017 version of the event as WWE Champion, set for a showdown with John Cena. Styles and Cena had put on some clinics not long before, with the phenomenal one beating Big Match John at both Money in the Bank and at SummerSlam. Chasing a record-tying 16th world title, Cena shot right out the gate and tried to ground his smaller, quicker opponent, though AJ soon rallied, countering a suplex attempt with a Hurricane Rana and then unleashing some impressive power moves of his own. The finishers soon flew thick and fast, and appropriately, given that this was their third major singles meeting, it became a game of I'll counter that, you counter my counter, and I'll counter your counter to my counter. Nothing could quite get the job done as they emptied their arsenals, digging deep into their bags of tricks before Cena said F you and hit a pair of AAs after a Super AA only got a 2 count to bag his 16th world title. Word life. Number 1, Triple H versus Cactus Jack in 2000. But if we're talking about the spectacular and violent WWE title matches that took place at the Rumble, there really is only one choice for the top spot. The match that established Triple H as the man and gave Mick Foley one last Madison Square Garden masterpiece before hanging up the snakeskin boots, this street fight between the cerebral assassin and hardcore legend hasn't lost any of its impact over 20 years later. A textbook example in how to make someone, Foley was his typically unselfish self as he put his body through hell and took some seriously hard hits. Credit to Hunter too, who also suffered for his art and actually got a very nasty gash in his calf about halfway through the bout. A breathtaking escalation of barbarity, they kept upping the ante with chairs, handcuffs, the announce table, the ring bell, a barbed wire covered 2x4, and finally the pièce de résistance, a massive bag of thumbtacks. Cactus ate the pins and then the pin on a pedigree, but proved that he was still the most ruthless children's author this side of Dr. Seuss with his remarkably sadistic efforts.